In the spring of 1918, a cook at a Kansas military base complained of a headache. Within hours, hundreds of soldiers collapsed. Within months, a third of humanity was infected. Within a year, more people were dead than in all of World War I. Their lungs filled with blood, their skin turned blue. And the people it killed first? The healthiest among us. This was the Spanish flu. And for 18 months, it was the most efficient killer in human history. March 11th, 1918. Camp Funston, Kansas. Albert Gitchell, a company cook, reports to the camp hospital before breakfast. Fever, sore throat, headache. The kind of symptoms a military doctor sees a dozen times a week. He's told to rest. By lunchtime, over 100 soldiers are in the infirmary. By week's end, 522 cases. But here's the thing. Most of them recover. They're back on their feet in a few days, ready to ship out to the battlefields of France. The doctors call it 3-day fever and file their reports. What they don't realize is that they've just documented the opening act of the deadliest pandemic in recorded history. This is 1918. The Great War has been grinding through its 4th year, consuming a generation of young men in the trenches of Europe. America has finally entered the fight, and massive military camps like Funston are training hundreds of thousands of recruits to be shipped overseas. These camps are crowded, chaotic places, men sleeping in hastily built barracks, eating in mess halls packed shoulder to shoulder, drilling in close formation. The perfect incubator for infectious disease. And these young soldiers are about to carry something far deadlier than rifles across the Atlantic. Within weeks, the same illness appears at military installations across the eastern United States: Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. Then it crosses the ocean with the troop ships. By April, it's in the trenches of France. By May, it's swept through the British Expeditionary Force. 3/4 of French troops fall ill. More than half of British forces are affected. But it remains for now relatively mild. An inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Then something remarkable happens. The only place in Europe where newspapers are allowed to report honestly about the disease is Spain. Spain is neutral in the Great War. They have no censors suppressing bad news, no government officials worried about troop morale or revealing military weakness. So when the flu hits Madrid in May 1918, Spanish newspapers report the truth. The king is sick, government officials are bedridden, thousands are ill. The rest of the world, reading only Spanish reports because their own governments are hiding the story, assumes Spain must be the epicenter. The name sticks: Spanish flu. Spain is furious. Their officials protest that the disease clearly came from elsewhere, but the damage is done. History will remember it as the Spanish flu, even though Spain had nothing to do with its origins. Meanwhile, the warring nations of Europe suppress the story completely. Britain, France, Germany, their newspapers barely mention it. Morale must be maintained. The war effort cannot be undermined by reports of illness. So the public remains largely unaware of what's spreading through military camps and port cities. By summer 1918, the first wave subsides. The virus seems to burn itself out. Medical authorities breathe easier. It was a disruption, certainly, but manageable. Compared to the carnage in the trenches, a few days of fever seemed insignificant. But influenza is not like other diseases. It's a shapeshifter. Its genetic material is unstable, prone to mutation. And somewhere during that summer, whether in the sweltering barracks of an American army camp, or the rat-infested trenches of France, or the crowded wards of a field hospital, the virus changed. In August 1918, ships began arriving in ports around the Atlantic basin, carrying passengers with a familiar illness. Fever, body aches, respiratory distress. It looked like the spring flu, the same 3-day fever that had passed through the military camps. But it wasn't the same, not anymore. This time, people didn't recover in 3 days. This time, healthy young men collapsed in the morning and drowned in their own blood by nightfall. This time, the virus had learned how to kill. September 1918, Camp Devens, Massachusetts. A young soldier wakes with a headache. By afternoon, his fever spikes to 104 degrees. By evening, his face has turned a dusky blue. Cyanosis, the doctors call it, though they've never seen it progress this fast. His lungs are filling with fluid. He's drowning on dry land. By the next morning, he's dead, and he's not alone. In 6 days, Camp Devens records 6,674 cases. The camp hospital, designed for perhaps 2,000 patients, is overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses work 20-hour shifts. They run out of beds. They run out of coffins. Bodies stack up in the morgue faster than they can be processed. One Army doctor writes a letter that captures the horror. These men start with what appears to be an ordinary attack of influenza, and when brought to the hospital, they very rapidly develop the most vicious type of pneumonia. It is only a matter of a few hours then until death comes. It is horrible. What makes it horrible is not just the speed of death, it's who the virus is choosing to kill. Normally, influenza follows a predictable pattern. It kills the very young, whose immune systems are undeveloped, and the very old, whose bodies are weakened by age. Mortality charts typically show a U-shape, high death rates at both ends of the age spectrum, low rates in the middle. But the 1918 flu is different. Its mortality chart forms a W. Children are dying. The elderly are dying. But there's a third spike right in the middle, a massive peak centered on age 27. The healthiest people in society, those in their 20s and 30s, those with the strongest immune systems, are dying in the greatest numbers. It defies all medical logic, and it's happening everywhere, all at once. In Philadelphia, the city holds a massive Liberty Loan Parade on September 28th to sell war bonds. 200,000 people pack Broad Street, shoulder to shoulder, waving flags, celebrating American might. Within 72 hours, every hospital bed in Philadelphia is full. Within a week, 4,500 people are dead. By mid-October, the city is burying 700 bodies a day. There aren't enough grave diggers. They start using steam shovels to dig mass graves. In Boston, telephone operators collapse at their switchboards. In New York, the subway cars are half empty because too many people are sick to go to work. In rural Alaska, entire Inuit villages are wiped out in a matter of days. Places like Brevig Mission, where 85% of the population dies in less than a week. The symptoms are unlike anything doctors have ever witnessed. Patients hemorrhage from their noses, their ears, their eyes. Their lungs fill so rapidly with bloody fluid that some victims die within hours of their first symptoms. Autopsies reveal lungs that are no longer pink and spongy, but dark, heavy, and solid, completely filled with blood and fluid. One nurse describes walking into homes to find entire families dead. This is not the flu anyone remembers. This is something else entirely. By October 1918, the death toll in the United States is reaching 200,000 for that month alone. The morgues are full, the hospitals are full, the graveyards are full. And the virus is still spreading. The world has never been so connected, and that connectivity is killing it. Steamships that once carried silk and spices now carry infection. Trains that linked nations for commerce now link them in death. Every trade route, every railway line, every port city becomes a vector. The same global infrastructure that created prosperity in the early 20th century is now the perfect mechanism for planetary catastrophe. India is burning. Between 12 and 17 million people die there, 5% of the entire population. It's the only decade in India's census history where the population actually decreases. British colonial officials, already stretched thin by the war, watch helplessly as the death toll climbs beyond comprehension. Villages in rural provinces are found completely abandoned, their inhabitants either fled or dead. In cities like Bombay, the bodies pile up faster than they can be cremated, or buried, according to religious custom. Africa is similarly devastated, though the records are fragmentary. In British Somaliland, officials estimate 7% of the native population dies. In the diamond mines of Kimberley, South Africa, a quarter of the workforce perishes. The colonial authorities, focused on maintaining production and order, fail to implement effective public health measures until it's far too late. The Pacific Islands, isolated for millennia, proved tragically vulnerable. When the virus reaches Samoa aboard steamships, it cuts through the population like a scythe through wheat. Western Samoa loses 22% of its population in a matter of weeks. The island of Fiji sees similar devastation. These island communities have no immunological history with influenza strains from the continental landmass. Their isolation, once a shield, becomes a death sentence. But there are exceptions that prove the rule. American Samoa, separated from Western Samoa by only a few miles of ocean, records not a single death. How? The governor, John Martin Poyer, implemented a complete quarantine. No ships were allowed to dock. No passengers were allowed to disembark. Supplies were loaded onto rafts and floated ashore. The policy was ruthless, absolute, and it worked. American Samoa remained an island of life in a sea of death. Australia also manages to delay the inevitable through aggressive maritime quarantine, keeping the first two waves at bay. But isolation can only last so long. When the borders eventually reopen, the virus finds its way in. Back in Europe, the war grinds toward its conclusion, but the virus is killing faster than the artillery. More American soldiers die of influenza than are killed in combat. The German army, already exhausted and undersupplied, suffers massive flu casualties that contribute to the collapse of their final offensive. Some historians argue that the Spanish flu didn't just coincide with the end of World War I, it helped cause it. The armistice is signed on November 11, 1918. Cities across the Allied world erupt in celebration. Millions of people pour into the streets, embracing, singing, dancing. Every public health official knows this is a disaster in the making. Mass gatherings in the middle of a respiratory pandemic. But the war is over. 4 years of slaughter have finally ended. How can you tell people not to celebrate? The parties become super-spreader events. The third wave begins. It's less deadly than the fall wave, but it still kills. Through the winter of 1918 and into the spring of 1919, the virus continues its harvest. By now, most people have either been infected and survived or have died. Herd immunity is developing not through vaccination, there is no vaccine, but through the brutal mathematics of mass death. By summer 1919, the virus finally begins to recede. Not because humanity defeated it, but because it had simply run out of victims. When it was over, the silence was deafening. Entire families gone. Streets that once echoed with children's voices, now empty. A generation of young adults, the ones who should have built the 1920s, buried in mass graves from Alaska to India. The global death toll remains uncertain even today. Early estimates put it at 21 million. Modern research suggests 50 million. Some historians now believe it exceeded 100 million people. To put that in perspective, the Spanish flu killed more people in 18 months than the Black Death killed in 4 years. It killed more people than World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War combined. With a global population of only 1.8 billion, that means between 3 and 6% of everyone alive in 1918 died of this disease. So why did it stop? 3 reasons. First, the virus mutated again. Influenza is unstable by nature, constantly shifting its genetic code. The hyperlethal strain that defined the fall wave eventually evolved into less deadly variants. Second, herd immunity. By mid-1919, so many people had been infected and survived that the virus struggled to find new hosts. And third, the most brutal reason, It had killed most of the people it was going to kill. The most vulnerable were already dead. For decades, the Spanish flu remained a medical mystery. Doctors in 1918 didn't even know what a virus was. They wouldn't isolate the first human influenza virus until 1933. The pandemic was remembered but not understood. It became a ghost story, a historical footnote. Then, in 1997, a retired pathologist named Johann Hultin traveled to Brevig Mission, Alaska, that village that lost 85% of its population in 5 days. He had been there once before, in 1951, searching for preserved tissue samples. This time, he found what he was looking for: the body of a woman buried in the permafrost, her tissues frozen for 79 years. Inside those tissues, fragments of the virus remained intact. Hultin sent the samples to a team of researchers at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. By 2005, they had sequenced the entire genome of the 1918 virus. For the first time, science could see what had killed so many. It was an H1N1 influenza A strain with genes of avian origin, a bird flu that had jumped to humans and adapted with devastating efficiency. Then, in July 2025, researchers in Switzerland decoded another complete genome from a preserved patient in Zurich. The discovery revealed something crucial. The virus had already fully adapted to humans at the very start of the pandemic. That's why it spread so fast. That's why it was so lethal. It didn't need time to learn how to infect us. It already knew. This research isn't academic nostalgia. Every flu pandemic since 1918, the Asian flu of 1957, the Hong Kong flu of 1968, the swine flu of 2009, has been caused by descendants of that original 1918 virus. It's still with us, still evolving. The seasonal flu you get today carries genetic echoes of the virus that killed Albert Gitchel's bunkmates at Camp Funston. The Spanish flu taught us that pandemics don't announce themselves. They start quietly. A cook with a headache, a traveler with a cough. By the time we recognize the danger, it's already too late for containment. The only defenses are the ones we build in advance: vaccines, surveillance systems, public health infrastructure, and the willingness to act before the bodies start piling up. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And this particular rhythm? We'd be wise not to forget it.